Mia Collins stared out over the calm, dark waters, the faint glow of the moon reflecting off the waves, and in that moment, she realized just how far she'd fallen. "You think I don't know?" she whispered to herself, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. It wasn't the first time Ethan had tried to make her feel small, but this time, it was different. This time, she knew the game he was playing. He wasn't just after money, he was after everything. And that's exactly what he was going to lose. Everything. The truth had always been there, hiding in plain sight. Ethan's greed, his ambition, she'd seen it from the start, but this was something else entirely. The betrayal was the final blow, the one that shattered the last illusion of a marriage that was built on lies. Ethan Collins, her husband of 5 years, had pushed her off a boat for $5 billion. That wasn't just a betrayal. It was a death sentence. Or at least, he thought it was. But Mia wasn't going to die. She wasn't going to be the helpless woman in distress. She was going to make sure Ethan understood one thing. You don't get to win when you play dirty. And now, as she stood here, ready to confront him, the smile on her face was a reminder that her survival was his greatest mistake. Her eyes narrowed, and the memories of that night began to flood her mind. Ethan's cold, calculating words echoed in her ears. "You have to let go, Mia. It's the only way. Trust me." Those words had haunted her, not because of the danger he'd put her in, but because of how easily he'd said them, as though she was nothing more than a pawn in his grand scheme. For the first time, she realized just how little he thought of her. The woman who'd stood by his side through everything. The woman who had loved him unconditionally, who had supported his dreams, never asking for anything in return. And this was how he repaid her, with the cold waters of the Atlantic swallowing her up, as if she were nothing more than a piece of trash he could throw away when it was convenient. But Ethan had underestimated Mia. He had no idea who he was dealing with. She wasn't just some trophy wife, some pretty face who had nothing to offer. She had strength. She had a plan. She had a fire that burned brighter than any ambition he could ever dream of. Mia wasn't going to be silenced. She wasn't going to let him get away with what he had done. No, she would come back. And when she did, Ethan would realize that no amount of money could save him from the consequences of his actions. The boat incident? That was just the beginning. It wasn't long before Mia had gathered all the strength she needed to survive, and once she did, she started to make her move. Slowly, methodically, she worked behind the scenes, planning her return with a calmness that would have made Ethan proud if he hadn't been the reason she had to make such a plan in the first place. Days turned into weeks, and Mia found herself in a quiet hotel room, far from the world that Ethan had once controlled. She watched the news, keeping track of every move he made, every decision he took, every step that brought him closer to the life he wanted. But Mia wasn't just watching. She was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ethan thought the world was his now. He thought that with $5 billion, he could do anything, be anyone. He was wrong. He wasn't the only one with power. He wasn't the only one who could manipulate the world around him. As the days passed, Mia grew stronger. She didn't let herself forget what he had done. She didn't let herself forget the way he had betrayed her. Every night, she would imagine what it would feel like to finally stand face to face with him again, to watch the shock on his face as he realized that Mia Collins wasn't a woman to be discarded, to be ignored. Mia was a woman of substance, and she was about to show him just how much. Ethan had thought he could get away with anything. But when he walked through the door of their shared home, expecting victory, he was going to realize just how wrong he was. And Mia? She would be there, waiting for him, with a smile that held 1,000 secrets. She wasn't just going to confront him. She was going to make him feel the weight of his own actions. Every lie, every betrayal. And it would be in that moment that Ethan Collins would realize the most important lesson of all. Never underestimate the woman you thought you could break. As he walked in, still basking in the afterglow of his success, Mia didn't even flinch. She was calm, composed, the picture of grace. But Ethan had no idea what was about to happen. She was ready. She had planned. And now, he would face the consequences. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you, Ethan? Mia's voice was low, but it carried across the room like a storm waiting to unleash. You pushed me off a boat for $5 billion. You thought you could get away with it. But I'm still here. And you're going to wish you'd never made that mistake. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, daring him to respond. But Ethan had no words. No excuses. He stood there, frozen, as Mia took a step forward. She had come back from the edge of death, and now, she was ready to take back everything he had stolen from her. It wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about making sure that Ethan Collins understood who Mia Collins truly was. Mia sat quietly in the small, dimly lit hotel room, the soft hum of the air conditioning her only company. Days had turned into weeks since she had been cast off that boat like an unwanted piece of cargo. She had survived. She had lived. And now, every day that passed, her resolve grew stronger. The anger, the betrayal, it all fueled her. She had felt the cold, relentless water swallowing her whole, but somehow, deep down, she knew she wasn't going to drown. She would fight. She would rise again. And Ethan would pay. It wasn't just about money. No, it was deeper than that. Ethan had taken everything from her, her dignity, her trust, her love. He had made her believe that their life together was a partnership, a team. But that was before the moment he decided she wasn't worth the effort, before he pushed her into the abyss for a sum of money he thought would be his ticket to everything he ever wanted. Mia's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup as she thought about all the things she could do. Now, all the people she could become. But she wasn't just going to run away and start over. No, Mia wasn't like that. She had spent years building a life with Ethan, a life that now felt like a distant dream, one that had been shattered by his greed. And she was going to make sure he understood that. There was no running. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions. The plan had been set into motion the moment she stepped off that boat. It had taken time. Patience was the key. But now, it was time to move. She didn't need to tell anyone what had happened. She didn't need to cry out for help. The world didn't need to know what Ethan had done to her. She would show him, face to face, in the way only Mia Collins could. As the days wore on, Mia found herself watching Ethan from a distance. She had people in her corner, people who knew how to keep track of him, how to follow his every move without him even noticing. She knew everything about him now, the meetings he attended, the deals he was making, the lies he was telling. And as she watched, she couldn't help but smile. Ethan thought he had won. He thought he had everything he ever wanted, but Mia knew better. The truth was, he hadn't won anything. Not really. Because Mia wasn't just some trophy wife, some arm candy that could be discarded when the price was right. She was stronger than that. She had power. She had the kind of power that Ethan didn't even realize existed. And it was that power that would bring him to his knees. She had carefully constructed her plan, and now, all she had to do was wait for the right moment. That moment would come soon enough. She just had to be patient. She had learned how to be patient. Ethan had made the mistake of thinking she was weak. But now, Mia was stronger than ever. She had no time for games, no time for excuses. She had no desire to explain herself to anyone. This was about her, about taking back what had been taken from her. And as the weeks passed, Mia's strength grew. She had taken control of her life in a way that she had never thought possible. She was no longer the woman she had been when Ethan had first pushed her into the water. That woman was gone. The woman standing here today was someone different. Someone stronger. Someone who would make Ethan regret the day he ever thought he could break her. The night was coming, the night when everything would change. Mia had returned home, quietly, without anyone noticing. She had kept her presence hidden, preparing for this moment, for this confrontation. Ethan was still riding high on his success, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. He was confident, cocky, thinking that nothing could touch him now. He had the money. He had the power. He had everything he wanted. But what he didn't have was Mia. And that, in the end, would be his downfall. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Mia's heart raced. She was ready. Ethan wouldn't know what hit him. She was going to confront him in a way he never expected. The door opened, and Ethan stepped inside, his face lighting up as he saw her sitting there. He didn't look surprised at first. He didn't see it coming. And why would he? He had no idea what she had been planning. He smiled, thinking this was just another one of their quiet moments together. But Mia wasn't here for that. She wasn't here to play nice. She wasn't here to forgive him. She was here to make him pay. The smile on Ethan's face slowly faded as he realized the woman sitting in front of him was no longer the woman he had left behind. Mia stood up, her posture straight, her eyes burning with the intensity of someone who had been wronged. She didn't flinch. She didn't back down. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you, Ethan? Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as though the storm inside her had already passed. You thought that I would just disappear, that I would be forgotten. But here I am. Ethan took a step back, his confidence faltering for the first time. Mia took another step forward, closing the gap between them. She wasn't afraid. You pushed me off that boat, Ethan. You thought it was the end. But it wasn't. It's just the beginning. The words hung in the air, and for the first time since their confrontation, Ethan was speechless. He didn't know what to say. Mia had won. He hadn't even realized it yet, but he had already lost. The smile on her face was all the proof he needed. The woman standing before him was not the same woman he had discarded. Mia Collins was stronger now. And Ethan? He had no idea what was coming next. Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing as he tried to process the situation. He had expected Mia to be broken, to be a victim of her circumstances. But this was not the woman he had pushed off that boat. Mia was no longer the same person, and that realization hit him hard. He could feel his confidence starting to crumble as Mia stood there, unwavering, like a force of nature that he could not control. You thought you had it all figured out, didn't you? Mia's voice broke the silence, calm yet firm. You thought I was just going to disappear, that I would vanish into the ocean and be forgotten. But you were wrong, Ethan. I'm still here. The words hung in the air like a challenge, a declaration of her strength. Ethan's mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, an excuse. But nothing came. He was speechless. He had no idea what to say, no way to spin this situation into something he could control. Mia wasn't the fragile woman he had betrayed. She was someone else now, someone stronger, someone with a purpose. And that purpose was clear. She would make him pay for what he had done. Ethan shifted uneasily, his eyes darting around the room as he tried to figure out what was happening. He had expected anger, maybe even tears, but Mia wasn't giving him that. She wasn't giving him any emotion to exploit. Instead, she was cold, calculating, her every word and movement deliberate. I've spent weeks thinking about what I should do, Mia continued, her tone steady. At first, I wanted revenge. I wanted to make you feel the pain you've caused me. But now, I realize it's not about revenge. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about showing you who I am. Showing you that I'm not someone you can just throw away when I no longer serve your purposes. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He had never thought of Mia as anything other than the perfect accessory to his life, his beautiful wife, his partner in everything. But now he saw her differently. Now, he realized that she had always been more than he had given her credit for. Mia wasn't some helpless, dependent woman. She was smart. She was strong. She had survived. And now, she was standing right in front of him, reminding him of just how wrong he had been. Mia took a slow step forward, her eyes locked on his. You think you can buy everything with money, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. You think that with $5 billion, you can erase the damage you've done, that you can wipe away the consequences of your actions. But you're wrong, Ethan. Money can't fix everything. It can't fix what's broken between us. It can't erase the trust you've shattered. Ethan's heart raced, his chest tightening as he struggled to find his footing. Mia was right. He had always believed that money was the answer to everything. It had brought him power, success, and the lifestyle he had always dreamed of. But it hadn't brought him happiness. It hadn't brought him peace. And it certainly hadn't brought him Mia. I didn't think it would be like this, Ethan muttered, almost to himself. I didn't think you would come back. I thought I had won. Mia's expression softened for just a moment, but only for a moment. She shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. You didn't win, Ethan, she said, her voice firm now. You never won. You thought you could control everything. But you couldn't control me. And that's what you don't understand. Ethan was stunned. He had never imagined Mia could be this strong, this resolute. He had always seen her as someone who needed him, someone who depended on him for everything. But now, the tables had turned. Mia was no longer the woman he had discarded. She was someone entirely different. Someone who had found her strength in the face of betrayal. And it terrified him. Mia took a deep breath, as if gathering herself. You have your $5 billion, Ethan. You think that's enough? You think that's all that matters? But what you don't realize is that you've already lost the one thing that money can't buy. Ethan frowned, confusion evident on his face. What's that? He asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Me, Mia replied, her voice unwavering. You've lost me. You've lost everything that mattered. And now, you have nothing left. There was a long silence as the weight of her words settled over both of them. Ethan stood there, motionless, unable to respond. Mia had stripped away all of his defenses, leaving him with nothing but the truth. He had lost, and there was no amount of money that could change that. Mia stepped closer to him, her presence now commanding, her confidence undeniable. You can try to buy your way out of this, Ethan, she said, her voice low but steady. But it won't work. You can't buy back what you've lost, and you can't undo what you've done. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had no answers, no excuses. Mia was right. He had thought he could get away with everything. He had thought that money would solve all his problems, that it would give him power over everyone, including her. But he had underestimated Mia. She wasn't the woman he had pushed off that boat. She was stronger, smarter, and far more capable than he had ever given her credit for. And now, as he stood there, speechless and defeated, he realized the truth. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. Mia wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor. And in that moment, Ethan knew that his life would never be the same again. The silence between Mia and Ethan hung in the air like a thick fog, neither of them willing to break it. Ethan had been caught off guard, unable to come up with a single word to defend himself. For once, he was the one left speechless, and Mia was finally in control. She had always been the one in his shadow, the one who quietly supported him, but now, the tables had turned. Mia could feel the weight of her own power, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that Ethan could no longer manipulate her. As the minutes stretched on, she remained calm, her gaze steady and unwavering. Ethan, on the other hand, was a mess. He fumbled with his words, tried to form sentences, but nothing made sense. His confidence had evaporated, and for the first time in their entire relationship, Mia saw him for what he truly was. A man who thought he could control everything, but in reality, he controlled nothing. You think you can buy me back with your money, Ethan? Mia finally asked, her voice still calm, but laced with a hint of mockery. You think that $5 billion is going to fix what you've broken? That it's going to make everything go back to the way it was? Ethan stood there, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had never thought Mia would react like this. He had never thought she would be anything other than the obedient wife who would forgive him. But Mia wasn't that woman anymore. You pushed me off that boat for money, Ethan, Mia continued, her voice now rising with anger, though her composure never faltered. You thought you could get away with it. You thought that just because you had the money, you could do whatever you wanted, that you could throw me away like a piece of trash. But I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. What could he say? What excuse could he offer? There was nothing he could do to make things right. The money he had gained, the success he had worked so hard for, it all meant nothing in this moment. He had lost. Mia had taken back control, and there was nothing he could do to stop her. You thought you could push me aside and walk away with your $5 billion, Mia went on, her voice steady now, as if she had all the time in the world to make him understand. But you don't get to do that. You don't get to treat people like they don't matter. You don't get to use them as stepping stones to get ahead. Ethan's face was a mask of disbelief. He had always been the one in control. He had always been the one making the decisions, calling the shots. But now, as Mia stood in front of him, it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. You're right, he said finally, his voice low and shaky. I've been wrong. I've been selfish. I've only thought about myself. But Mia, I didn't know. I didn't think. Stop, Mia interrupted, her tone cutting through the air like a knife. You didn't think. You never thought about me. You never thought about what you were doing to our life, to our future. You were so caught up in your own ambition that you didn't see the damage you were causing. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I see it now, and I see you for what you really are. A man who will do anything for power, for money, no matter who he hurts along the way. Ethan opened his mouth again, but this time, no words came out. He realized that Mia wasn't looking for an apology. She wasn't looking for some grand gesture to make up for what he had done. She didn't need his money, his success, or his empty promises. She needed him to understand that his actions had consequences, that there were lines you couldn't cross without facing the price. Mia took another step forward, her eyes narrowing as she regarded him with a mixture of pity and disdain. "I could walk away, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I could disappear and leave you to your 5 billion. But I'm not going to do that. Because you need to learn. You need to understand that no amount of money, no amount of power, can erase the hurt you've caused." She turned away from him, walking slowly across the room. "You've made your bed, Ethan," she said over her shoulder. "Now you have to lie in it." Ethan watched her as she walked away, the weight of her words hitting him like a ton of bricks. He had been wrong. He had thought he could buy everything, control everything. But now, standing in the empty silence of the room, he realized just how much he had lost. The $5 billion meant nothing. The power, the success, it was all meaningless without Mia by his side. And that was something he would never be able to get back. Mia reached the door, her hand on the handle. She paused for a moment, her back still to Ethan. "I'm done, Ethan," she said softly, the finality in her voice unmistakable. "I gave you everything. But you chose money over me. You chose your ambition over our life. And now, I'm walking away. I'm taking back what you tried to steal from me." With that, she opened the door and stepped out into the night. Ethan stood there, motionless, as the door closed behind her. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind spinning as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. He had lost her, and he knew, deep down, that he would never be able to fix what he had broken. The city felt different that night. The streets were quieter, the air cooler, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. Mia walked through the empty streets, her heart steady but her mind racing. She had made her decision, and now there was no turning back. Every step she took felt lighter, as if the weight she had carried for so long was finally being lifted. Ethan's words still echoed in her head, but they no longer had power over her. The man she had once loved, the man she had stood by through thick and thin, had finally revealed himself for who he truly was, a man consumed by greed, willing to throw away everything for money. But Mia was done with that version of their life. She was done with the woman who had let him manipulate her. She was done with the life she had built alongside him, a life that had turned into nothing more than a facade. She was reclaiming herself. She was taking back the woman she had lost somewhere in the depths of her marriage. She knew that she wasn't walking away with just her dignity intact. She was walking away with something more powerful, the strength to build a new life on her own terms. As Mia turned a corner and the lights of the city grew dimmer, she allowed herself a moment of peace. The betrayal she had faced, the cruelty she had endured, were all in the past now. Ethan no longer had a hold on her. She could hear her footsteps echoing down the quiet street, a reminder of how far she had come. Her future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Mia felt a sense of freedom. She didn't need Ethan. She didn't need anyone. She had everything she needed within herself. As she reached her small apartment, Mia paused for a moment, taking in the familiar surroundings. This place wasn't much, but it was hers. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could finally be herself without the pressure of someone else's expectations. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but she was no longer afraid. She had taken the first step toward her new life, and nothing was going to stop her now. The phone on the counter buzzed, snapping Mia out of her thoughts. She glanced at it, seeing a message from her best friend, Lily. "I can't believe you did it. I'm so proud of you. You're free now." Mia smiled as she read the message. It was the encouragement she needed. She wasn't alone. She had friends who supported her, who believed in her. She wasn't the only one who saw the strength within herself. Mia typed a quick reply. "Thank you. It feels like I'm finally awake." She set the phone down and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars in the night sky, and for the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she had a place in this world. She wasn't defined by her past, by her mistakes, or by the man who had tried to break her. She was her own person, standing tall and strong, ready to take on whatever came next. Mia was no longer just a victim of circumstances. She was a survivor, and she would keep moving forward no matter what. Ethan, wherever he was, would never be able to reach her again. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. The only person who could truly control her life was herself. She had fought for her freedom, and now it was hers. No one could take that away from her. Mia turned away from the window and walked toward the kitchen, her steps purposeful. She had no more time to waste on the past. She had a future to build, one where she would be in charge of her own destiny. She didn't need anyone to tell her who she was or what she could be. She would show the world. She would show herself. As she opened the fridge to grab a bottle of water, Mia paused for a moment. There was a certain stillness in the air, a quiet satisfaction that settled in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt complete. She had come through the storm, and now the calm was here. Mia wasn't sure what would happen next. She didn't know where life would take her, but she knew one thing for sure. She would never let anyone take away her strength again. She was in control now. She was the one who held the power. She had survived, and now she was going to thrive. The days following Mia's decision to leave felt both exhilarating and surreal. Every moment was a reminder of the freedom she had fought for, a reminder that she no longer had to live for anyone else's expectations but her own. The world seemed brighter now, and the possibilities ahead felt endless. Mia woke up every morning with a sense of purpose, her routine a mix of old habits and new adventures. She spent her days exploring new hobbies, meeting new people, and rediscovering the parts of herself that had been buried for so long. She found solace in small, simple things, like taking long walks in the park, savoring a cup of coffee in a quiet cafe, or reading books she had always meant to read but had never had the time for. It was as if she were rediscovering life itself, one step at a time. But no matter how much she tried to focus on the present, there were still moments when the past crept back in. Mia couldn't erase what had happened between her and Ethan, no matter how hard she tried. It was impossible to forget the way he had betrayed her, the way he had tried to push her aside as if she were nothing. But those memories no longer held the same power over her. They were just memories, no more real than the ghost of a shadow. They were a part of her past, and she had learned to accept them as such. As much as Ethan had tried to break her, she had emerged stronger, more determined. And every day, she was reminded of just how far she had come. As the weeks turned into months, Mia's life began to settle into a rhythm. She had started a small business, using her creativity and determination to turn a passion into something tangible. She wasn't making millions, but she didn't care. She was doing something that made her feel alive, something that brought her joy. And that was enough for now. She had learned that happiness wasn't something you found by chasing after wealth or success. It was something you created within yourself. One evening, as Mia sat in her apartment, reviewing some designs for her business, she heard a knock at the door. Startled, she hesitated for a moment before walking over to answer it. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Lily standing there, a wide grin on her face. "I have something for you," Lily said, holding out a small envelope. "What's this?" Mia asked, taking the envelope. She opened it to find a letter, the handwriting unfamiliar to her. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the words on the page. It was from Ethan. The letter was short, but its message was clear. He wanted to meet. He wanted to talk, to explain himself. Mia felt a surge of emotions: anger, confusion, and even a strange sense of curiosity. Why now? Why, after everything that had happened, was he reaching out to her? She could feel her pulse quicken as her mind raced with questions. Was this some sort of game? A last-ditch attempt to manipulate her again? Or was it something else? For a moment, she just stood there, holding the letter in her hands. She had come so far since that night on the boat. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up. But was she really ready to face Ethan again? Was she ready to hear whatever he had to say? Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had moved on. She had let go of the past. But that didn't mean she was afraid of facing it. And it didn't mean she had to let him back into her life. But what if this was her chance to finally get the closure she needed? To hear him admit his mistakes and understand the pain he had caused? Or was she just setting herself up for another round of manipulation? Mia didn't know what to think. The idea of seeing Ethan again stirred something deep within her, a mixture of old wounds and new strength. She had changed so much since the last time they were together. And now, she was no longer the same person who had clung to him, who had tried to make their marriage work at all costs. She was stronger. She was wiser. And she was no longer afraid. She had the power to control her own narrative. Ethan could no longer hold the reins of her life. But despite all that, Mia knew that she couldn't ignore the letter. She couldn't ignore the need for closure, for understanding. She owed it to herself to face him, if only for one final conversation. Mia closed the door and sat down at her desk, the letter still in her hands. She took a moment to collect her thoughts. She wasn't going to let this meeting define her. She wasn't going to let Ethan's words dictate her future. But at the same time, she knew that she had to be honest with herself. If she was going to meet him, it had to be on her terms. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to let anyone take away the strength she had gained. After a few minutes, Mia made up her mind. She was going to meet Ethan. But this time, it would be different. She would walk into that room as the woman she had become, not the woman she had been. She would face him, but she wouldn't let him manipulate her again. She would listen, but she wouldn't be swayed. This was her moment. Her time to take control of the past and move forward into the future. Mia stood up, folded the letter carefully, and placed it in her drawer. She wasn't going to let it consume her. She had the power now. She had the strength. And no matter what happened next, Mia knew one thing for sure. She was ready. Mia stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She had made the decision to meet Ethan, but now that the time had come, she felt a twinge of uncertainty. Her mind was swirling with thoughts of what he might say, what he might try to do to manipulate her again. But she quickly pushed those thoughts aside. She had already made up her mind. She was going to face him, but this time, she would be the one in control. As she adjusted her jacket and took one last look at herself, Mia reminded herself of the strength she had gained. She was no longer the woman she had been when Ethan pushed her off that boat. She was different now, stronger, wiser, and no longer afraid. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to let him undo all the progress she had made. With a deep breath, Mia walked out the door, her steps steady and sure. She wasn't walking into this meeting as a victim. She was walking in as a woman who had reclaimed her life. When Mia arrived at the cafe, the atmosphere felt strangely familiar. It was the same place where she and Ethan used to meet, a small, cozy spot tucked away from the noise of the city. It felt almost surreal to be here, knowing that this time, she wasn't coming to share a latte or discuss their plans. This time, she was coming for answers, for closure. Mia stepped inside and glanced around, her eyes quickly finding Ethan sitting at a corner table. He looked just like she remembered, but there was something different about him too. He wasn't the confident, smug man she had known. There was a weariness in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. As she walked toward the table, Ethan stood up, his face softening when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Mia could feel the tension in the air, the weight of all the unsaid words hanging between them. "Mia," Ethan finally said, his voice quiet. "You look different." Mia smiled faintly, though it wasn't a smile of warmth. "I've changed," she said simply. Ethan nodded, as if absorbing her words. "I know. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. About what I did to you." Mia didn't respond immediately. She just took a seat across from him, her posture straight and her eyes locked on his. She wasn't here to listen to excuses. She wasn't here to hear him apologize. She was here for one reason only, to understand. Ethan took a deep breath and sat down as well, his hands fidgeting on the table. "I was wrong, Mia," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I never should have treated you the way I did. I never should have pushed you aside for something as stupid as money. I thought I could control everything. I thought I could make everything work by myself, but I was wrong." Mia watched him closely, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. She had heard these words before, over and over, but they had never meant anything. They were just words, empty apologies meant to manipulate, to win her back. This time, though, something felt different. He wasn't pleading with her. He wasn't asking for her forgiveness. He was just acknowledging what he had done. "Do you know what it felt like, Ethan?" Mia asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Do you know what it felt like to be betrayed by the one person I trusted the most? To be thrown away like I didn't matter? Do you know what it felt like to be left for dead, just so you could have more money?" Ethan's face twisted in pain at her words, but Mia didn't soften. She couldn't. Not yet. "I thought about that moment every day, Ethan," she continued. "I thought about the way you looked at me before you pushed me. Like I was nothing. Like I was a thing you could just get rid of. But I'm still here. And I'm stronger than you'll ever understand." Ethan reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly. "Mia, please. I know I can't take back what I did. I know I can't undo the past. But I need you to understand, I never meant for it to go that far. I never wanted to lose you." Mia shook her head, pulling back slightly. "You don't get to tell me how I should feel, Ethan," she said firmly. You don't get to decide what's best for me anymore. You lost that right the moment you made me feel like I was nothing. The room fell silent for a few moments, the weight of Mia's words hanging in the air. Ethan sat back in his chair, his expression somber. Mia could see the regret in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I'm sorry, Ethan said again, his voice barely a whisper. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am. I've been sorry for a long time. Mia's eyes softened just slightly, but she remained resolute. I'm not looking for your apology, Ethan. I'm not looking for you to make things right. What I need, what I've needed all along, is for you to understand that you can't control me. You can't break me. I'm not the same woman I was before. I'm not the same woman who let you make all the decisions. I'm not the woman who stood by you, thinking you were my partner, when all along, you were just using me. Ethan's face darkened, and for a moment, Mia saw the flicker of the man he used to be, the man who thought he could win at all costs. But it was only a moment. I see that now, he said quietly. I see that now, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Mia looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She wasn't sure if she would ever be able to forgive him. Maybe in time, she would. But for now, it didn't matter. She had let go of the past, and that was enough. Goodbye, Ethan, she said softly. I hope you find peace with yourself. With that, Mia stood up from the table, her heart steady, her mind clear. She had come here for closure, and she had found it. Ethan wasn't the man she had once loved. He wasn't even the man she had hoped he would become. But she was no longer the woman she had been when she had trusted him. She was Mia Collins, and she was free. Mia walked out of the cafe, her footsteps echoing through the quiet streets, each step a reminder of how far she had come. As the door swung shut behind her, she took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs. She had faced Ethan, and she had given him the closure she needed. She had heard his apologies, seen the regret in his eyes, but it no longer mattered. She wasn't that woman anymore. The woman who clung to the hope that things would get better, that things could go back to the way they were. No, Mia was stronger now, and she was finally at peace. She had walked away from the past, from the person who had tried to break her, and she was ready to embrace the future. As Mia made her way home, the city lights seemed brighter, the world felt a little less heavy, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive. She passed by the places she had once visited with Ethan, the spots where they had shared laughter and dreams, the places that had once held so much meaning. But now, those places felt different. They didn't hold her anymore. They didn't define her. Mia had carved her own path, and she was no longer tied to the memories of a life that had never been hers to begin with. When she arrived at her apartment, Mia felt a sense of calm wash over her. She stepped inside, locked the door behind her, and leaned against it for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. She was alone, but for the first time, she didn't feel lonely. She felt free. The past was behind her, and the future was full of possibilities. Mia had spent so much of her life giving to others, trying to make things work, trying to fix what was broken. But now, she was done fixing other people's problems. Now, it was her turn to live for herself. The journey she had been on had been difficult, but it had been worth it. It had led her to this moment, this place where she could finally breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of water. As she unscrewed the cap, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and saw a message from Lily. You did it, Mia. You really did it. I'm so proud of you. You're stronger than you know. Mia smiled as she read the words. It was exactly what she needed to hear. Lily had been her rock through everything, the one person who had never wavered, who had always believed in her. And now, Mia was finally starting to believe in herself. She typed a quick reply, "Thank you. It feels like I'm finally free." She set the phone down and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. The lights flickered in the distance, and Mia could feel a sense of hope rising inside her. There was a whole world out there waiting for her. She didn't know exactly where her path would take her, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready for whatever came next. Her life was hers to live. Mia turned away from the window and walked over to the couch. She sat down, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes for a moment. The journey had been long, but she had made it. She had survived. And now, she was going to thrive. She didn't need anyone else to tell her who she was or what she could do. She had the power to decide her own fate. Mia picked up a book from the coffee table and opened it, ready to immerse herself in a world of her own making. She wasn't going to wait for permission anymore. She was going to live. She was going to dream. And she was going to do it all on her own terms. Mia woke up to a soft morning light streaming through the curtains. The city outside was waking up too, the hum of traffic in the distance reminding her that life went on, that the world kept turning, regardless of the choices she had made. But for Mia, this morning was different. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control. She wasn't bound by the past, by anyone's expectations. She was living for herself, and that feeling was more powerful than anything she had ever known. As she sat up in bed, stretching and taking a deep breath, she couldn't help but smile. It was a small, quiet smile, but it meant everything. It was a smile of freedom, of knowing that she was no longer trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. She was free to be whoever she wanted to be. The weight of Ethan's betrayal no longer pressed on her chest, suffocating her. It wasn't that she had forgiven him, or that she had forgotten what he had done. It was that she had moved past it. She had learned that holding on to the past only kept her tethered to a version of herself that no longer existed. Mia had grown. She had changed. And with every passing day, she was becoming more and more the person she was meant to be. After a long shower, Mia made herself a cup of coffee, sitting by the window and looking out at the city below. The sun was rising higher now, casting a golden glow on everything it touched. The world was full of possibilities, and Mia was ready to explore every single one of them. She wasn't sure what her future held, but she was no longer afraid. She had learned that the future wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. For so long, Mia had let fear guide her decisions, let the fear of failure and rejection keep her in a life that wasn't hers. But now, she was done with that. She had let go of the fear, and in doing so, she had found her strength. Mia knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, of testing you in ways you never expected. But she was ready. She was stronger now, wiser, and more determined than ever. She had faced the darkness, the betrayal, and she had come out on the other side. And in doing so, she had learned the most important lesson of all. She was capable of so much more than she had ever believed. With her coffee in hand, Mia walked over to her desk, where her business plans and designs were neatly organized. She had big dreams now, dreams that went beyond surviving, beyond just getting by. She had a vision for her future, and she wasn't going to let anyone stand in her way. She had a purpose now, and she was going to chase it with everything she had. The phone buzzed on the table, snapping Mia out of her thoughts. It was a message from Lily. "How's it going? You doing okay?" Mia smiled and typed a quick reply. "I'm good. Better than I've ever been. Thank you for always being there for me." She set the phone down and glanced at the window again, letting her gaze wander across the skyline. Everything looked different now, and it was all because she had taken control of her own story. Mia had always been capable of so much, but she had never realized it until now. She had spent so much of her life trying to fit into someone else's idea of who she should be, but now she was living for herself, and that was the only person she needed to be. As the day wore on, Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had already started building the life she had always wanted. Her small business was growing, and she was gaining confidence in her ability to navigate the world on her own terms. She didn't need anyone else to validate her anymore. She didn't need anyone's approval. All she needed was her own belief in herself. Mia had spent so much of her life trying to fix things for others, trying to make things work in a relationship that was never meant to be. But now, she was focused on what truly mattered, her own happiness. She had learned that her happiness wasn't something that could be given to her by someone else. It was something she had to create for herself. And that was exactly what she was doing. As the evening drew near, Mia sat on her couch with a glass of wine, reflecting on the journey she had been on. She thought about the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak. But she also thought about the growth, the strength, the lessons. She had survived it all, and now she was thriving. Ethan's chapter in her life was over. It had been a painful chapter, but it had led her to this moment, to the person she had become. She was no longer the woman who had been broken by his betrayal. She was no longer the woman who had clung to a relationship that wasn't right for her. She was Mia Collins, a woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. She was ready to take on whatever came next. And with that, she raised her glass to the future, to the life she was building, and to the woman she had become. The past no longer defined her. The future was hers to shape.